And here's what's wild that no one's telling you, and it's going to sound like bad news, but it's actually not, is God doesn't need you. God doesn't need you. God doesn't need me. Like, he can usher in his kingdom just fine without us. In fact, a lot of times I think we get in the way of God doing his thing, if I'm real with you. What's amazing is when you go back to the first time Jesus did that fish miracle and stepped into Peter's boat and changed his name from Simon to Peter, there's a lot of commentators that believe Jesus stepped in Peter's boat because Jesus needed it, right? The context of that was the crowd was pressing around. Jesus was giving a message, and so they're violently pressing it around. And so Jesus, the commentators say, needed Peter and needed Peter's boat so that he could get away from them to separate because he still had a message to give, but he couldn't give the message with the crowd pressing around him. And so he needed to get out onto the water, so therefore he needed Peter's boat. He also needed like the amplification system of the water because it has this really natural acoustics. There were no microphones and surround sound systems, so Jesus needed a boat. There was no bows, and so Jesus needed the boat system. Come on, somebody. So Jesus needed all of that to give a message, and so he needed Peter in that moment. That's why he stepped in Peter's boat. But here's how I know that's not true. Jesus didn't need Peter or his boat, and I'll prove it to you. Because later in Jesus' ministry, Matthew records this for us in chapter 14, that shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. He doesn't need a boat to get on the water to separate. Are you kidding me? I think the message would have been more powerful if he'd have just stood out there on the water and given it. Well, he needed the water, the amplification, the acoustics. He needed all that to work for him. No, he doesn't. Mark 1 says, a voice came from heaven declaring, this is my son, with whom I'm well pleased. In Acts, a voice comes from heaven and calls Paul. God doesn't need Peter, his boat, or the water. I'm just saying that when you can walk on water and when you can speak from heaven, you have no need. And yet, in that moment, he still steps in Peter's boat. Why? He doesn't need Peter. Why does he do it? Because he wants Peter. Because he just loves him. Why does he step in your boat, call you? Why does he do any of this? Not because he needs you, but because he just loves you and he wants you. And I think it's really freeing to know that God doesn't need me. In a world where we get into relationships with one another, a lot of times because we need one another, right? Spouses need each other. Friends need friends at times. Church, we need one another to be the greatest and fullest expression of God in this community. Kids need parents. I think a lot of times we get into relationships with others because we need them. And sometimes I don't know if you feel this way. I do sometimes. It feels like there's some people in my life that I'm not even sure if they want me in their life. It just feels like right now they need me in their life. And when I started thinking about that, God actually doesn't need me. God doesn't need you. Are you kidding me? He could do this far better. Even thought about my message today. Like, I can give a message, but God, if you just show up and, I don't know, make Amanda come out of the hospital and, right? And if you just like kill someone in the middle of the service and raise them back to life, by the end of it, I think people will show up next Sunday. God doesn't need me. Let's just say that. It's kind of comforting. Say, God doesn't need me. Come on. God doesn't need me. Come on, a couple more times. God doesn't need me. God doesn't need me. God doesn't need me. Stand up, will you? Now I want you to say, but God wants me. Come on, but God wants me. But God wants me. Come on, don't just say it once. Say it till you believe it. Come on, but God wants me. But God wants me. But God wants me. Even after I failed, yes, but God wants me. Even after I've fallen short, yes, but God wants me. But you don't know my story. I don't need to know your story. I know that God wants you. I know He doesn't need you. He wants you. And when we come from this place of God wanting me, not needing me, then I know that the whole reason I'm doing this is not because I'm good, and it doesn't depend on my perfection and my performance. It solely depends on God. And for whatever reason, He invites you and me into a life where we can not only have relationship with Him, but we can then use our gifts and talents in a unique way to bring His kingdom in this world. Gives me great comfort to know, though, that if I fall, it's not going to ruin God's kingdom. And that God will come right back, even after dying a death, and visit me in a charcoal fire to remind me the invitation's still open. And I feel like today there's a lot of people that God has called to be Peter that you've resorted back to Simon. And today you're going to stop playing Simon Says, and you're going to listen to who Jesus says you are. You are